Hey guys, and welcome to this edition of Scruff's Garage. Today's video, I'm not working on the Corvette. I'm working on my wife's 2015 Acura RDX. And it's a great vehicle, except ever since we first got it, we've had a squealing kind of metallic rubbing noise that comes from the driver's front wheel area. And all the research I've done suggests that it's actually the brake pad shims that are rubbing against the rotor. When you turn left just a little bit, you'll hear a faint squealing noise as that shim hits the rotor. So I decided at this point, even though the front brakes aren't worn out, I'm just going to go ahead and do new pads, new rotors, because we've also had a brake pulsation since we first got the car. I think those rotors have been resurfaced. Previously, we bought it as a certified pre-owned. So it's really not worth, in my opinion, trying to resurface those rotors again. If I'm going to pull it all apart, I might as well just go in with new stuff, and then I can be done with this for a period of time. So I looked at a few options, and I've decided I'm going to go with the PowerStop. They're drilled and slotted front rotors, and they're Evolution Sport front brake pads. They're a ceramic pad. Seem to get pretty good reviews, not too much noise or dust, and pretty decent braking performance. And I got a really good deal on all of this. I actually ordered it through Amazon, and it came as a package deal for the RDX. And of course it comes with the new shims and those little springs, and some brake caliper grease as well. So I'm excited to see how this turns out, and hopefully we get rid of that squealing noise when we turn left. That's the most important thing. So I'll just walk you through the steps. Obviously it's a pretty simple deal to change front brakes, but we'll walk through it together and you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so we're over here on the passenger side. The lighting's a little better over here, so I'll just demonstrate over here. Obviously I've already got the car jacked up, and so the front end supported on jack stands, and the tire taken off. Our next step will be to remove the front brake caliper. It uses a 14 for the front brake caliper bolts, and then it's a 19 to hold the slide pin so that the whole thing doesn't spin. And then we'll move on to taking the front brake caliper bracket off next. Okay, you can use a bungee cord to hold up the brake caliper. Just don't let it hang by the front brake hose. Could damage that. Okay, next we're going to take the brake pads out. Of course, there's this little spring here. Always pay attention when you take pads out that you keep the orientation the same. Sometimes that makes a difference. Sometimes the inner pad is different from the outer pad. So in this case, the inner pads have the squill tab, and it's at on the top side. So just pay a little attention to that. Now we will remove the front brake caliper bracket bolt. Those are a 19 millimeter. So we'll put a breaker bar on those. Okay, and then the last step in taking off the rotor, if it's never been taken off before, there's typically a little Phillips head screw that holds the rotor to the hub. Go. That came out pretty easy on this. Yours may not come out that easy. Typically that screw is just used to hold the rotor to the hub as the vehicle is moving down the assembly line. When we go back together, I probably won't install that. It's not really needed to hold the rotor on. It's not functioning in any capacity. But if you ever strip that out and then you can't get it off, then you're really hosed. Okay, so we got the brake caliper on the bench. Let's see if we can old clips off. There we go. We'll just match up, make sure all of our hardware is the same, and it appears that it is. Alright, so I'm going to walk this over to the solvent tank, and I'll just clean up this just a little bit. Then we'll also pull these slad pins out. There we go. And we'll re-grease this while we have it out. That way everything is functioning smoothly. And then we'll put it all back together. Okay, so we got both of our slab pins greased, boots back on. Next we want to press on the brake pad clips. There we go, pretty straightforward. And then we're also going to lubricate these clips, because that's where the pads are going to slide in and out. So we'll put a bit of grease in there. I used to buy these cheap little, I guess, paint brushes, little brushes, whatever. And I just use them as disposable grease spreaders. Alright, simple enough. Now we can begin reassembling on the vehicle. Okay, so we've got our new brake rotor. Obviously, if you're using drilled and slotted rotors, they're labeled passenger side and driver's side. If you're using just standard blanks, then it's all the same. Typically left and right are the same. You may also want to, well, not may, you should wipe them down with some brake cleaner. Make sure there's no oil residue. These weren't too bad because these are, I believe these have a zinc coating on them. It's anti-corrosion. That's what the silvery kind of finish is, but your average brake rotor probably doesn't have that. So they have a light oil mist on them to keep them from corroding or rusting during shipping and while they're sitting in the store or warehouse. So you want to make sure you clean that off thoroughly. Now we're ready to put our brake caliper bracket back on. Make sure nothing is touching or rubbing. Alright, and then these two brake caliper bracket bolts, they get put back on very tight. They're around 90 to 100 foot-pounds. Okay, so we've got the rotor slip in place, we've got our brake caliper bracket on and torqued to spec. Now we've got our inner and outer pads to put on. These are pretty straightforward. There we go. Next, we'll slide our brake caliper in place, but first we'll probably need to press the piston back in. Especially if your brake pads were really worn down, then that brake caliper piston is probably extended quite a bit. Acura has this little decorative bracket on here. Kind of gets in your way if you're using one of the tools, but not the end of the world. Just slowly compress that piston back in. Keep in mind that as you're pressing that piston back in, you're pushing brake fluid back to the master cylinder. If you've been topping off brake fluid repeatedly, which you shouldn't be doing, because the brakes are a sealed system, you should never be losing brake fluid. make sure you're not overflowing the brake fluid reservoir. Otherwise you'll have to siphon some out, because as you push this back in, could be over full at the reservoir. If you like, you can smear a bit of grease either on the back side of the brake pads or on the piston itself, at some of these friction points where the caliper will actually touch the brake pads. Don't put too much, because grease will attract and hold dirt, but a little bit, just make sure there's no squeaks or noises. Alright. Slide the caliper back into place, and we'll put in the lower bolt first. But before we put in the top bolt, we'll rotate the caliper back out a bit. And remember the spring that we took out, going to put that back in. That slides in there like so. Can I get where you can see that? Alright, then we'll put our top caliper bolt back in. Alright, then these two bolts get torqued to 37 foot-pounds, I believe it is. Go. Don't go crazy on these bolts. They aren't that large of a bolt. You don't want to strip those threads, or you'll have really damaged the caliper. Okay, so just give it a little spin. Make sure the rotor spins freely. It's not getting hung up. There's not something out of place locking up the rotor. Anyway, so that's how the front brakes are done on an Acura RDX. Pretty much like every other vehicle. Pretty straightforward. So if it's a project you need to tackle, certainly not too difficult. At this point, obviously, you put your tire and wheel back on, torque the lug nuts to the factory specifications. I still have a few more projects I'm going to do. Obviously, you can see the oil filters right there. I'm going to go ahead and do an oil change while I've got things apart. My wife's vehicle is due for service anyway. I'm going to rotate the tires also. But if you have any questions, anything I skipped or you've got a question about, hit me up in the comments. Happy to answer any questions if I can. So thanks for tuning in to Scruff's Garage. We'll see you next time.